Oh, I'm supposed to turn on the light, or turn on the mic, yes. Kewin Fedman, Director of the National Gallery of Art, Dr. Maria Rosano Jackson, Chair of the National Endowment of the Arts, and Shelley Lowe, Chair of the National Endowment for the Humanities. Thank you for being here to discuss the budget priorities for your agencies for fiscal year 2025. Originally, we also had the Smithsonian scheduled, and we were going to do 2 panels, but apparently the administrator is not feeling well, and so I understand that. Preserving our culture, art, and history is essential to protecting the legacy of our nation and preparing us for the future. The National Gallery of Art is one of the most renowned and visited institutions tasked with this responsibility. Each year, millions of visitors, both in person and online, access your collections. Through your exhibitions, educational, and outreach programs, you encourage children and scholars across the world to discover new knowledge, experience art, and explore the world around them. The NEA and NEH are tasked with similar responsibilities, bringing incredible opportunities through art, history, and education to rural communities. Whether it's healing through the arts, arts education, research on artificial intelligence, or promoting historical research amongst middle school and high school students in preparation for the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, I've seen firsthand the impact that the NEA and NEH dollars have had in my district in Idaho. For FY25, the President has requested $250 million for the National Gallery, $210 million for the National Endowment for the Arts, and $200 million for the National Endowment for the Humanities. I appreciate the opportunity to understand how the budget supports your agency's priorities and reasonably builds on the investments Congress has made in 2024. We must ensure that the gallery's facilities are protected to reduce risks to the collections, visitors, and employees, and that we continue to support the NEA, NEH efforts to expand access to the arts and humanities to all Americans. I look forward to our discussion and appreciate you all being here. Now I yield to the Ranking Member Pingree.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm so happy to have you all here today to discuss the fiscal year 2025 budget request for our arts and humanities agencies. I'm lucky enough to also be the chair of the Arts Caucus, and I know the arts have an incredible value as a positive tool for economic development, education, and community building. I'm very proud that over the last few years we were able to increase funding for the National Endowment for the Arts and the National Endowment for the Humanities to historic highs, and that we were able to protect their funding in the challenging fiscal environment of fiscal year 2024. And while I'm glad we protected it, it's still not enough. At $270 million each, the endowments are small, but they're mighty powerhouses, and this modest investment has a far-reaching impact with funding benefiting every single district in America. I'm sorry the Smithsonian wasn't able to participate today, but I'm so glad the National Gallery of Art is with us. These institutions inspire, challenge, and educate us through their collections. We know that operating facilities in a constrained fiscal environment is challenging. Yet it is essential that we continue to share the Smithsonian Institution and the National Gallery collections with the nation and the world and maintain them for future generations. I am pleased one way the Smithsonian Institution does this is through the Smithsonian Affiliate Program that affords museums such as the Abbey Museum in Bar Harbor in my state access to the Smithsonian resources. I look forward to discussing the FY 2025 budget requests for the arts, humanities, and the National Gallery, and learning more about the goals you have outlined for fiscal year 2025. Thank you again, Director Feldman, Chair Lowe, and Chair Jackson for appearing before us this afternoon. I appreciate your testimony and your answers to our questions. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you. Director Feldman, we'll start with you.
Thank you. Chair Simpson, Ranking Member Pingree, members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. It is my great pleasure to talk to you about the National Gallery of Art and address our fiscal year 2025 federal budget request. I would also like to thank you for your support of our fiscal year 2024 budget, which provided the critical funds to keep the National Gallery operational as we emerged from a very challenging time to set new attendance records. In my time with you, I will share just a few examples of how the National Gallery is serving growing audiences regionally, nationally, and inspiring experiences with inspiring experiences made possible by our beautiful facilities and the masterpieces that we hold in trust for the nation. American generosity has been at the core of our identity since the beginning. In 1936, in a very populist gesture, our founder, Andrew W. Mellon, wrote to Franklin Delano Roosevelt, suggesting that America needed a major museum to expose her citizens to the best works of art across time. He proposed a public-private partnership and offered to donate his collection and the necessary funds to build a world-class museum. The gift was accepted by the President and Congress with a pledge of federal support, and the work began. Here on the table, you see the original letter from FDR, written on New Year's Day in 1937, accepting Mr. Mellon's offer for the American people. President Roosevelt presided over the dedication of the museum on March 17, 1941, when he stated that works of art matter because they are, quote, symbols of the human spirit. And I have to say, it moves me profoundly that during some of humanity's darkest hours during the Second World War, the President and Congress recognized that art was central to our democracy. Last year, the National Gallery welcomed 3.8 million visitors, making us the second most visited art museum nationally and the 8th most visited globally. At our 25-acre campus on the Mall, all people are invited to explore artistic wonders through our permanent collections and special exhibitions. A major attraction is our stunning portrait of Ginevra da Benci by Leonardo da Vinci. Painted 25 years before the Mona Lisa, our portrait is Leonardo's only painting in the Americas, and is a treasure that people flock to see. And in case you haven't visited her lately, I do have not the original, and we couldn't bring Ginevra today, but we are fortunate to have two masterful drawings by Leonardo, one of which I've brought with me. His grotesque head of an old woman is one of several drawings he made that explores human physiognomy. In these tiny, grotesque drawings, Leonardo combined real-life observation with a kind of outlandish imagination, preparing him for the unprecedented range and subtlety of human expression for which he's so famous. Although this drawing is one of the smaller works of art in our collection, it is among the most significant and fascinating. And all three works by Leonardo were gifted to the nation by patriotic Americans. Archival materials such as the FDR letter and any work of paper on art, including Leonardo drawings, are part of our Make an Appointment program. So literally anyone can make an appointment to see these objects in person in our supervised study rooms. Our commitment to inviting all people to explore and experience art extends beyond our walls. To share one example, our massive open online course, known as a MOOC, offers free and dynamic virtual classroom experiences to educators of all grade levels, subjects, and locations. Since the program's launch in 2019, we've hosted nearly 37,000 participants, joining us from every single state. And because our collections and resources belong to the American people, we have plans to share more of our original works of art beyond our Washington campus. Already a generous institutional lender, we will lend more of our collection to museums located in communities outside of major urban centers all across America with long-term loans and new exhibition partnerships. Of course, none of this service to our nation would be possible without the support of this committee and Congress. I'm happy to answer your questions expanding on our FY 2025 budget request and our work to serve the American people. I extend my heartfelt gratitude for your commitment to the National Gallery of Art and its mission to serve the nation by welcoming all people to explore and experience art, creativity, and our shared humanity. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Dr. Jackson?
Good afternoon, Chairman Simpson, Ranking Member Pingree, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. It is an honor to be with you today to discuss President Biden's fiscal year 2025 request of $210.1 million for the National Endowment for the Arts. Thank you for your tremendous support. Separate from my written testimony, in the few minutes I have, I'd like to highlight key elements of how we're seeking to fulfill our mission and why it matters. The NEA is a small but mighty agency. Our staff has worked tirelessly to help make arts participation possible for all Americans, and I'm proud to work with such devoted public servants. The arts sector continues to be a remarkable economic driver, contributor to the well-being of our communities, an important element of our social fabric. The most recently available data show that in 2022, the arts and cultural industries generated $1.1 trillion and supported 5.2 million jobs. However, large portions of the creative economy throughout the country still face hardships. For example, data show that in several arts realms, the economy and employment have not fully returned to pre-pandemic levels, and arts workers' wages have faced a slow recovery. And there's tremendous need. Year after year, the number of applications to the NEA continues to rise. The President's budget meets this critical moment. It supports and strengthens the NEA's core funding opportunities and partnerships, bolsters the creative economy at a significant time of need, expands opportunities for arts participation for all, including arts education in rural, tribal, and other historically underserved communities, and advances work at the intersection of arts and health and well-being. Research demonstrates that the arts lead to positive outcomes. For example, the arts are shown to improve social and emotional learning among students. Arts participation benefits brain health for seniors and helps address the invisible wounds of war for veterans and active military, and more. The President's budget reflects what we know to be true. We cannot reach our full potential without access to the arts. The budget continues to invest in initiatives with broad reach and strong bipartisan support, such as Creative Forces, the Arts Education Partnership, Poetry Out Loud, and Big Read. It continues the longstanding practice of awarding 40% of NEA's grant-making dollars to state and jurisdictional arts agencies and regional arts organizations for regranting. From Idaho Falls to Portland, Maine, local arts agencies extend the reach and impact of federal investments, and we're grateful for these mutually beneficial partnerships. The President's budget also bolsters our obligation and commitment to serving Indigenous communities. Informed by Indigenous artists and leaders, we're making additional investments to better serve, including hiring our first Director of Native Arts and Tribal Affairs. The Arts Endowment is fortifying relationships with minority-serving institutions of higher education, which provide valuable educational opportunities, prepare new generations of workers and entrepreneurs, and enrich the cultural fabric of our country. We recognize the importance of engagement in rural communities. Working with rural leaders, we're finding new ways to help ensure longstanding programs have greater benefit. For example, the Arts Endowment is strengthening its Citizens Institute on Rural Design, which has operated for decades, and Shakespeare in American Communities now supports touring programs with expanded geographic coverage in rural places. Through these and other programs, this budget will allow us to strengthen connection to rural America and support local leaders. The President's budget supports Arts Here, a partnership-based national initiative launched in fiscal year 2024, which bolsters programs and services for all types of historically underserved communities. We're also strengthening our work on arts and health. We're proud of our longstanding record of supporting service members, veterans, and military-connected populations, and we continue to expand the Creative Forces program. We're also building on a robust body of research that demonstrates connection of the arts to our health and well-being. Consistent with this progress, the President's budget will support a new initiative focused on healing through the arts, emphasizing mental health and recovery from trauma and disaster. This will create new opportunities for arts workers to be fairly compensated while contributing to our well-being. In closing, thank you again to Chairman Simpson, Ranking Member Pingree, and to all members of the subcommittee, and I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you. Chair Lowe?
Thank you so much, Chairman Simpson, Ranking Member Pingree, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. Yat Shelley Lowe Yanashia, Belagana Nashlin, Anastasia Tachini Bashachin, Belagana Dasha Che do Traba Dashanala Locantiel de Nasha. My name is Shelley Lowe. I'm Navajo. I'm originally from Ganado, Arizona, and I'm chair of the National Endowment for the Humanities. And I just want to thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony on the President's fiscal year 2025 budget request for NEH. NEH is the nation's largest federal funder of the humanities, which includes history, philosophy, literature, language, ethics, law, archaeology, political theory, comparative religion, anthropology, sociology, and media and cultural studies, which I knew you knew all of those. Since its founding in 1965, NEH has awarded nearly $6 billion in grants to support museums, historic sites, colleges, universities, K-12 teachers, libraries, public television and radio stations, research institutions, independent scholars, and state and jurisdictional humanities councils nationwide. NEH approaches its 60th anniversary in fiscal year 2025, and now, more than ever, NEH is vital to fostering a strong, resilient, and thriving democracy and to sustaining the United States' role as a global leader in the humanities. NEH's fiscal year 2025 appropriations request of $200.1 million reflects the resources needed to continue NEH's support for American civil society, helping us to advance research and development in the humanities, examine the human condition, understand our cultural heritage, foster mutual respect for diverse beliefs and cultures, develop media and information literacy, and promote civics education. The President's budget includes $60 million, or approximately 40% of NEH's programmatic funding, for NEH's state affiliates, the state and jurisdictional humanities councils, to support humanities programming at the local level in all 50 states, the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, Guam, the Northern Mariana Islands, and American Samoa. NEH's 56 state and jurisdictional humanities councils are essential partners to ensuring the agency reaches audiences of all ages and in every community across the nation. One example is through NEH's longstanding partnership with National History Day, which engages more than 500,000 middle and high school students annually in a national historical research competition. NEH recently launched a program with the Humanities Councils to extend National History Day's reach to underserved communities. Funded projects include support for a 2-day workshop for Idahoan teachers on primary source research and place-based learning at the Idaho State Historical Society, a free 3-day educator workshop in Georgia at the nation's largest consortium of historically Black colleges and universities to reach educators and students in underserved urban communities in Atlanta, and teachers in training at HBCUs, and efforts to expand National History Day's impact in Maine, in the 3 most rural counties through partnerships with local and tribal educators, as well as cultural community leaders. NEH's fiscal year 2025 appropriations requests also include $74.4 million for NEH's flagship grant programs to support research and development, preservation, capacity building, and educational and public programming in the humanities in all 56 states and jurisdictions. As the largest and most prestigious funder of advanced humanities research in the United States, NEH invests in scholarship and complex research projects by individual scholars, collaborative research teams, and institutions in all disciplines of the humanities and humanistic social sciences. While this work may sometimes seem distant from everyday life, humanities research and development, or R&D, is foundational to American life. For example, NEH's support for humanities R&D has resulted in the publication of more than 16,000 books and academic monographs since NEH's founding in 1965, including 20 Pulitzer Prize-winning books. This includes American Prometheus, The Triumph and Tragedy of J. Robert Oppenheimer by Kai Bird and Martin J. Sherman, the biography that inspired the Academy Award-winning film Oppenheimer. NEH also supports the building blocks of humanities R&D by ensuring the public can more easily find and make use of cultural heritage collections at libraries, archives, museums, and historical organizations across the country, and by fortifying under-resourced collecting organizations such as small and mid-sized libraries, archives, and museums. Another core aspect of NEH's work is its support for the teaching and study of humanities at K-12 schools and colleges and universities around the nation, including Native American and Indigenous institutions, historically Black colleges and universities, Hispanic-serving institutions, community colleges, rural colleges and universities, schools with a majority minority undergraduate enrollment, and schools with significant numbers of first-generation students. NEH's public programming grants support the production of documentary films, museum exhibitions, and discussion programs that engage public audiences of all ages in questions with the humanities, such as the Civil War, the landmark documentary series by Ken Burns that was viewed by 4 million Americans when it first aired. NEH's leadership role in digital humanities has been widely acknowledged in the humanities field and has helped set the pace for research funders around the world. NEH's fiscal year 2025 appropriations request also provides $8.75 million in federal matching funds for NEH's grant programs to help stimulate and match non-federal donations in support of cultural and educational institutions across the nation. This includes support for a new pilot program that will focus on workforce development through matching funds for the hiring, training, and retention of humanities professionals at museums, libraries, archives, colleges and universities, and other cultural organizations across the country. The humanities are more essential than ever. The President's fiscal year 2025 budget for NEH provides $14.6 million for the agency's American Tapestry, weaving together past, present, and future strategic initiative, which emphasizes the role of the humanities in strengthening our democracy, advancing equity for all, and addressing our changing climate. Of note, NEH's fiscal year 2025 appropriation request includes $7.1 million for humanities perspectives on artificial intelligence, NEH's new agency-wide research initiative that supports humanities R&D to understand and address the ethical, legal, and societal implications of artificial intelligence, or AI. AI is one of the most powerful technologies of our time and will have profound consequences for civil rights and civil liberties, safety and security, and democratic values. Questions about the ethical, legal, and societal implications of AI are fundamentally rooted in the humanities. NEH's founding legislation tasks the agency with making the American people masters of their technology and not its unthinking servants. Created in response to President Biden's Executive Order 14110 on safe, secure, and trustworthy artificial intelligence, NEH's AI initiative features a new grant program that supports the creation of humanities research centers focused on AI at universities and independent research organizations. NEH's appropriations request for fiscal year 2025 includes funding to include emphasis on equity, privacy, and human rights, as well as educational and public programming that enhance AI literacy and public awareness of human perspectives on AI, such as support for the nationwide AI literacy program with all 56 state and jurisdictional humanities council. NEH's fiscal year 2025 appropriations request also includes $2.8 million to continue the agency's activities as part of United We Stand, Connecting Through Culture, an initiative launched in partnership with NEA that aims to combat hate-motivated violence, promote civic engagement, and achieve better mental health outcomes in the United States through the arts and humanities. Since the launch of this initiative in fiscal year 2022, NEH has invested more than $13 million to support humanities projects that foster cross-cultural understanding, empathy, and community resilience, and promote civic engagement, information literacy, and social cohesion. Furthermore, NEH proudly contributed to the formation of the White House's first ever U.S. national strategy to counter anti-Semitism, through commitments to offer research, teaching, and convening opportunities for humanities scholars to study the origins and history of anti-Semitism in the United States, as well as support the development of K-12 educational materials on countering anti-Semitism in partnership with National History Day and the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. NEH will continue to support these activities in fiscal year 2025. The President's fiscal year 2025 budget for NEH also includes $1.5 million for the development of a new program to support the revitalization and reclamation of Native languages and cultures. This program will complement NEH's partnership with the Department of the Interior on the Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative, a comprehensive effort to recognize the troubled legacy of federal Indian boarding school policies with the goal of addressing their intergenerational impact and shedding light on the traumas of the past. To date, NEH has allocated nearly $5 million to support the digitization of records from the United States system of over 400 federal Indian boarding schools, the creation of a permanent oral history collection to document the experiences of the generations of Indigenous students who were raised in the federal Indian boarding school system, and new humanities projects that deepen the public's understanding of this chapter in our nation's history. NEH's fiscal year 2025 appropriations request will also further the Pacific Islands Cultural Initiative, an NEH initiative that aims to strengthen the cultural and educational sectors in the U.S. Pacific Islands, Hawaii, American Samoa, Guam, and the Northern Mariana Islands, which face unique challenges due to their remote geography and the historic underinvestment in the region by the federal government. NEH's work in the U.S. Pacific Islands includes emergency relief for cultural and educational organizations devastated by the wildfires in Maui in 2023. And NEH's recent disaster recovery efforts also include support for cultural organizations affected by natural disasters in Florida, Mississippi, New Mexico, and Vermont. Finally, the President's budget for fiscal year 2025 provides $42.35 million to operate NEH in an efficient and effective manner. This includes dedicated resources for 2 new offices formed as part of NEH's Equity Action Plan to embed equity across its programs and operations, the Office of Data and Evaluation and the Office of Outreach, which will evaluate NEH's impact on the humanities field and deepen the agency's engagement with underserved communities. The budget also supports the continued implementation of executive orders, directives, and administrative priorities involving organizational health and organizational performance and information security modernization. Chairman Simpson, Ranking Member Pingree, distinguished members of the committee, thank you again for supporting NEH and for your consideration of the agency's fiscal year 2025 appropriations request.
Thank you. Thank you all for your testimony. Full testimony will be included in the record. We've had hearings on the last few days on things like the EPA and the Forest Service and the Department of Interior and Indian Health Services and all those things that we need to do and like to do or are required to do. These are kind of things we like to do. So it is. I'm glad you're here today and be able to talk about the budget request. Director Feldman, this past year, the National Gallery lent 397 artworks to 43 museums across the United States. This partnership allows Americans across the country to see some of the gallery's collection and original works without necessarily having to travel to Washington. How have you utilized the gallery's lending program to expand the gallery's reach and impact? And what plans do you have to expand this practice to additional museums? And what are the challenges to bringing them to more rural America and stuff? And have you been able to partner with museums in smaller communities and rural areas?
Thank you very much, Chair Simpson. We take our role serving the nation very seriously. I like to say that I was hired with one very firm mandate from our Board of Trustees at the Gallery, which is to expand our service to the American people. And I never speak to our staff at the museum without reminding them all that we have an obligation and also a privilege to serve the American people. And so we spend a lot of our time thinking about how to expand that service. As you mentioned, we are very, very generous lending works of art from our collection for exhibitions that travel around the country and globally as well. And so our answer is always yes when we're asked for a loan, unless there is some reason why that work of art, usually because of condition or other commitments, can't travel. So we do a lot of that. We are in discussions right now about really, really expanding our loan program and lending works from the collection to smaller institutions that serve their regions, and doing it with long-term loans, so it's not just a 3-month exhibition, but actually enabling the nation's collection, national collection, to be in communities for a couple of years, and also doing that with exhibitions. And I think I have a relatively unique position as the director of the National Gallery, particularly according to my predecessors, because I have run really small museums across the country. This is my 4th museum that I've directed, and I often say that I know what it's like to have to go out and raise money for a lawnmower because one broke and there just isn't a budget to replace it. So I know what the challenge is for our institutions around the country, and we're dedicated to serving them. And we do it with all humility. We recognize that we have as much to learn from our regional partners as we have to share. So we're really excited about expanding that. In addition, if you'll indulge me, I sort of put together a list of some of the other things we do to serve the American people who maybe don't necessarily come to Washington, although 50% of the National Gallery's attendance comes from people, from domestic tourists from outside of our region. So through visitation, we serve the nation. We're really proud that we, over the last year, served close to 20 million people through our website and our social media programs. And with our website and those programs, of course, we are focused on art education and human creativity. And so we use our collection as the vehicle in all of those systems that we distribute through the website. We have a Summer Teacher Institute that last year reached teachers from 27 different states, so we bring them here to Washington. And we're pausing this year so that we can figure out how we can actually do more to impact rural teachers in the future. We share traveling exhibitions. We have a show that just opened in New Britain, Connecticut, of contemporary Native American art. We're also working with Jackson, Mississippi, Portland, Oregon, Denver, and Milwaukee in the coming year and a half. We have over 25,000 participants who join us for our virtual lectures, programs, educational programs, programs for children and parents, our art activities. I mentioned that we have a MOOC that has reached nearly 37,000 participants from every single state. We have something at the National Gallery Vault called the Center for Advanced Study in the Visual Arts. I always liken it to having a sort of educational institute within the National Gallery, and we bring a series of scholars and fellows to the National Gallery and to Washington. And I'm proud to say that we have alumni in 39 different states right now from that program. And we also distribute films that we've created about artists for exhibitions over the last number of years to local affiliate TV stations around the country. And we had 49 million views of those films over the last year. 12,000 schools receiving our materials, with 125,000 students with access to posters and our print materials in 42 different states. This year we had a boom in applications for our internship program. We have a paid internship program, and we had applications from 43 different states. And then the last thing I'll mention is a new series on our website we've started that's called From East to West. And I'm sorry, From West to East. And with that series, we're highlighting institutions, communities, and artists working all across the country, and showing that, again, our role as the National Museum is to highlight the great artists and creatives and institutions across America, and not just what we have in Washington. So that's a very long answer to your question, but we're very proud.
But you do a lot.
Yes.
So thank you, and thank you for bringing the Franklin Roosevelt letter and the Leonardo.
What is that?
Leonardo da Vinci.
So the gallery has 3 Leonardo da Vinci works, 1 painting and 2 drawings. And this is a drawing da Vinci did around 1490. He would walk the streets of Florence and Milan, where he lived, and come back and make these drawings. These grotesque figures were not people that he saw necessarily. They come out of his imagination. But they are sort of studies that prepare him. And I have to point out one of my favorite things, in addition to her sort of grotesque face, you can see how her cheeks are sunken in because she's lost her teeth. But with all of that, she has a little carnation tucked into her breast that's just peeking out there. Yeah. So you get that sense of sort of liveliness that Leonardo is so famous for.
Yeah. It is. I always get Michelangelo mixed up with everybody else because the first date my wife and I went on when we were juniors in high school was the agony and the ecstasy about Michelangelo and stuff.
Bring your wife back to the gallery and we'll show you Leonardo.
Well, I will tell you right now that I know this might sound like a threat, and it is, but I don't know that we'll be able to do an an appropriation for the National Art Gallery if the staff and the members haven't had an opportunity to go visit it, do a little tour of it and that kind of stuff. So,
Please come.
anyway, one other question. The fiscal year 25 request includes $5.65 billion for the gallery's share of the cost to finish construction of Pod 6, the new shared art storage facility at the Smithsonian Museum Support Center. Could you provide a status update on the finishing Pod 6 construction this fiscal year and explain how the shared storage center will help the gallery save on storage costs in the long run?
Yes, and thank you for asking that. I have to start by saying how incredibly grateful we are for your support of our storage facility. This is a facility that we are doing jointly with the Smithsonian. So the National Gallery will have 42% of the space in Pod 6 and the Smithsonian the rest. And I'm happy to say that it is on schedule and on budget. We expect to finish construction in the next fiscal year. And the money in the budget, the $5.6 million, is for storage equipment and sort of outfitting it so that we can then move the collection in. We currently spend just shy of $1 million a year leasing space off-site, so we will have future savings of that rented facility. But I would actually say most important for us is that one of my worries as a museum director is, of course, that the National Gallery is located in prime flood zone, and I am hesitant to have any of the collection below ground. And so having a state-of-the-art storage facility really enables us to care for these works of art that we hold in trust for the nation.
Thank you. I'll save the humanities for next round. Ms. Pingree?
Gosh, I don't know which one of you to start with. It's so great to have you all here. Thank you so much, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for your questions. Why don't I move to Chair Jackson and give you a break, Director Feldman? So I mentioned in my opening statement, and actually I don't have to tell you this. You know so well that the arts have an incredible value as a positive tool for economic development and education, community building, and you've shown so many good examples of that. And I just want to thank you. It was a real pleasure to have you come visit the state of Maine, and I highly recommend to my colleagues, if you haven't had either of our two endowment chairs come to visit your state. It's a really great experience, and I was able to show you probably not unlike Idaho, a lot of the small towns that have really benefited from revitalizing through the arts, places like Waterville and Rockland, and I know it meant so much to have them have you visit, and I think that just is a really important sort of exchange that we all do. So I want to talk a little bit about, as I said, we never get the numbers as high as I think they should be for the endowments, but we've been trying to at least hold our own in the last budget and eke it up a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about your vision for the arts, what you've been able to do with the increased support, and sort of how you see your role going into the future?
Thank you for the question, Ranking Member Pingree. And yes, it was wonderful to be in Maine with you. I want to start by, again, reiterating thanks for the support over the years and deep gratitude for what it has enabled us to do. The work at the Arts Endowment, I think right now, is really making sure that we are meeting mission and that we are up to date with the times. And part of that includes looking at our programs, the longstanding programs, and ensuring that they are truly reaching all Americans, that they're truly benefiting everyone, and making adjustments related to those. I think acknowledging and engaging a sector that is beleaguered as a result of the pandemic and issues that preceded the pandemic, and having close proximity to people in all parts of the sector to understand what that requires and how we can show up as a federal agency. I'm very excited about the work that we're doing to be intentional about making sure that we're having closer relationships and stronger impact in communities that have been underserved, including rural, tribal, communities with disability, communities that have been historically marginalized as a result of geography or race, socioeconomic status, et cetera. There's that. The work that's focused on the intersection of arts and health and well-being is something that is also really exciting and builds on the Creative Forces work. It builds on research that is gaining momentum, that is showing all kinds of value and impacts of the arts, active arts participation as well as engagement as audience, having to do with social fabric, with social cohesion, mental health. So making sure that we're able to talk about the arts in their fullness and how, at their best, they contribute, not in a silo or a bubble, but throughout people's lives in all different kinds of communities. The funding has allowed us to make progress and make sure that we are meeting mission and considering the context and times now.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I might as well pick on you too, Chairwoman Lowe. Thank you. I'm looking forward to getting you to Maine as well. And thank you for your very comprehensive overview of all the work that you do at the National Endowment for the Humanities. It's such a critically important part of what we do. One of the things I'm excited about that you're doing, I really don't want to single anything out because I think it's all so good, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about the American Tapestry Initiative. I was really pleased when earlier this year the Penobscot Nation Museum and the Hudson Museum at the University of Maine received a significant NEH grant to create a visual directory of Wabanaki basketry. We're very proud of our basket makers in Maine, and we're really excited to see increasing recognition for artists like Jeremy Frey, Teresa Secord. There was just a great story in the New York Times about how basket makers are sort of moving from obscure craft to, front and center art, and the Portland Museum of Art will be hosting an exhibit of Jeremy Frey. This grant will fund the creation of an online lexicon with images and terminology, and the work will help reduce errors in identification and preserve ancestral knowledge. I think it's an excellent example of preserving our heritage. So can you just tell us a little more about the American Tapestry Initiative and how you've been able to use the increases at the NEH received for programs like this over the last few years?
Definitely. Thank you so much for that question, Ranking Member Pingree. And my understanding is I have Maine on my schedule to visit before the end of the year. And I will be very much looking forward to it because I've been to the Native American Maine Basket Maker Show and Sale. And there's nothing quite like seeing the work that the artists put into everything that they bring forward and the culture that they share. American Tapestry, Weaving Together Past, Present, and Future, was an initiative created with joint effort from all of our program directors to really assess the work of the agency and to think about ways that we can extend our work into those areas and communities that we had not already been reaching. We focused on 3 major areas: strengthening our democracy, equity for all, and addressing our changing climate. And in this, our program directors really thought very hard about what we were funding now, what grant opportunities we had available, and how we could extend that to ensure that we really were reaching all communities and all individuals across the United States and bringing humanities to all. So, for instance, in some of our equity work, it meant developing new grant lines to allow smaller organizations to apply with projects that are a little bit less costly, so the funding would be lower. The management of those funds would be a little bit easier. This is something that we learned through the pandemic with our CARES and ARP funding, that some smaller organizations that we had never worked with before started to receive funding from us through CARES and ARP, and the process that we were able to go through to support them, including reporting lines that were not as extensive as when you have very large grants. And this was a very encouraging sign for us to be able to say that we could do some of our grant lines specifically for smaller communities, organizations, but also to bring forward those stories that we haven't heard from before, or those organizations and communities that were doing fabulous and amazing work in states and regions, but we're not getting funding at the national level. So like the example that you shared. In addition to other work with small communities, to really bring their culture forward, to be able to share that amongst themselves, but to share it more locally in their regions, and then to share it nationally. We've been very excited about how well this has been received by communities across the states and across the country. and to how many organizations and community members are coming to us now and saying, you know, I'm really excited. NEH is actually doing something that supports the work that we do and can help us to get this work moving forward. We will continue to do that work. We will continue to focus on strengthening democracy through the National History Day, like I mentioned, which was really an effort on our part to ensure that those communities that were not yet participating in National History Day, maybe hadn't even really known about it, were having resources and contacts that could help them to reach those students and teachers and communities and bring them into this national competition and national conversation. And of course, to think about how we're looking at artificial intelligence, not just at the national level, but also at the local level. What do we do to support that and to have these conversations about what it means for our future, what it means for our future as human beings and as we move forward. And lastly, I would just like to say the climate aspect of the initiative also reaches those smaller communities and organizations who have really been able to assess their own resources in terms of how they are preserving our cultural heritage, especially in small organizations and communities that are in older buildings and are having to say, you know, our building is not going to be able to preserve this material. We need to be able to think about how we make some changes, start some plans, and move that forward. We've provided the opportunity for organizations to be able to do that. So we're very excited, and we're looking forward to seeing how we can continue to fund organizations through this initiative.
That's great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll yield back.
Mr. Elgin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here. I love being on this subcommittee. I see Washington, D.C. as our nation's Paris for so many reasons: architecture, art, performing arts, and I'm glad that you all are here. And I did hear you say that Pod 6 was on time and under budget? On budget? Is there another department we can send her to run?
I can do several.
That's fantastic. Good for you. And since this place was built on a swamp, I understand the need for external storage everywhere else. I don't understand 16th century Flemish art. Is that what you studied?
Yeah, actually, my first degree was in Greek and Roman, and then in graduate school I studied 16th and 17th century Dutch and Flemish art.
Because you were a brat, right?
Yes.
Okay. So
Some might say I still am.
Sorry,
but yes.
she's a military brat. I'm a
Yes.
military
Yes.
guy.
Yes.
And so when did you decide archaeology? What did you go see? What museum did you go see that influenced you to now the door's open and now you're here?
Thank you. That's such a great question because it's proven in our fields that people who visit museums and really take their families to museums are the ones who went with their parents. And so my father, who had a PhD in electrical engineering and was a captain in the Coast Guard, would, when we were stationed in England, he took us all over Europe to go look at Roman engineering. And my father would geek out about a Roman aqueduct.
Yes.
And so when I went to the University of Michigan, I went as a political science major, and I took a Greek archaeology class for fun. And I think that's where I decided to switch and become an art historian.
A world of discovery, and that's what the three of you do for this country. As my son loves to go, we went to Gettysburg 3 days in a row last year, but he also loves to go to the museums in town here. Not quite the art one, but my daughter is the artist. So what you do is very important, and I'm glad that you're here and we can help out. I did have one question, and actually an ask is we need on the mall with millions of visitors every year, political events in a time of rising security needs. We need your help. I'd love to talk to you offline about perhaps getting some, not to interfere with the aesthetic of the building, an opportunity to strengthen the FirstNet receivers. If we could discuss that later, it won't come out of your budget, but maybe an opportunity, because as you well know, Steve Scalise had to fly over the mall in a Park Service helicopter after he was wounded, and that ability to communicate on the mall with so many visitors here is extremely important. So.
Understand, yes.
So
yep.
Anyway, I love what you
Absolutely.
do. So I don't take up too much time. I'm going to move on to Dr. Jackson. 35% of grants reach low-income audiences in under-resourced populations. I would argue District 6 of Texas, south of Dallas, is a very rural location. How do these grant programs especially help more rural communities like mine? And then elaborate on how the arts can serve and heal our veterans.
Happy to take those questions. Thank you. First off, the focus on rural communities is something that we've been very serious about and intentional about in the last few years. And understanding through proximity to these communities what they actually need seems really important. So as Congresswoman Pingree recounted the site visit that we did, getting close and talking with leaders in communities and understanding how their cultural ecosystems may look different from others, and being able to be responsive to that is really important. And that's something that we're looking at all of our programs to understand how can they better show up with communities that require additional attention and require particular understanding of how they work. So the Citizens Institute on Rural Design, for example, is a program that we're expanding. I'm especially excited about how that expansion happens because it builds capacity locally. It builds local leaders and helps them to understand the utility of design methods and the importance of the arts in their communities on their terms, not in a way that is helicoptered in, but in a way that feels organic to what they have to offer and what they aspire to. So there's that kind of review and adjustments that are happening throughout the agency. I think in terms of working with our military community, certainly Creative Forces is something that we have so much pride and respect for. We're really excited about the expansion of that program to now not only serve in clinical settings and on military sites, but in communities. So as military personnel go back into communities and civilian life, there's an opportunity to continue to benefit from the kinds of experiences that allow them to heal. The Creative Forces has adjacent to it some research programs that help us understand the benefits, both individually and collectively, and that's something that I think is beneficial not only for the military community, but for the whole country, to understand how health can be improved, how well-being can be improved, and certainly paying attention to the military population as a first starting place is the right thing to do. And there's so many benefits that flow from that, and we're eager to capture those.
Well said. And Ms. Lowe, when you opened up, I assume in your native tongue, I have a question about the preservation of indigenous languages and how we're losing those at a very quick rate. How is the Endowment for the Humanities working to preserve our native languages?
Thank you for that question. We've had two long-standing grant lines, one in our research division that is a collaboration with the National Science Foundation to document endangered languages. And these are large grants for researchers who come in and really look at the lexicon and the makeup of languages to document them and to put them into writing to preserve them. We also have a grant line through our Preservation and Access division that allows communities to do grants that create things like dictionaries and online lexicons or online resources for community members. I was recently in Mississippi at the Mississippi Choctaw Nation, and I met the current Miss Choctaw, and she talked about how she uses the online Choctaw dictionary in her work, especially when she goes out and she speaks to communities. And it's a resource that now students can get online and they can look up words. They're starting to learn the language, but they can at least look up words and figure out, what is Grandma or Grandpa saying? What are they talking about? Right, all of those things that they hadn't known before. So we've been really focused on making sure that we are supporting communities to revitalize and document their languages. But in our 2025 budget, we've got $1.5 million earmarked to really support this work. And this follows up with our work with the Department of the Interior on the Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative.
Go for it.
Okay. So I wanted to just take a second and talk about I'm going to finish up with what you were talking about, languages. And a language that everybody's kind of talking about now is the language of AI and GPT, right? Yep. And I noticed in your full statement, you talk about an initiative that was started on how to figure out human perspectives on AI. And that's, AI can be amazing in calculating and getting things going together faster, but it can also do a lot of misinformation, a lot of harm. So how's the humanities going to look at having public engagement to talk about the benefits, the pitfalls, and possible, I'm just going to say it, evils of AI?
Thank you so much for that question. Well, we began this work specifically on AI under the American Tapestry Initiative with a grant called Dangers and Opportunities of Technology through our Office of Digital Humanities. And this was to take projects specifically from researchers, independent scholars, teams within institutions to really assess what are the dangers, but also what are the opportunities of technology so that we have a better sense ourselves as a national community where technology does great things for us, but also where we need to be watching out for dangers of technology. This has grown into a new initiative that we are calling Humanities Research Centers for Artificial Intelligence. And this is specifically to look at AI, artificial intelligence, as it is being used across our society, and to really bring researchers, and this will be a collaboration between university institutions or between researchers within institutions or independent research organizations, to look at the topic, to really delve into it, and to think about how do we assess our ethical, legal, societal concerns when it comes to our use of artificial intelligence. The information and research that will come out of this will help us to create information that our state and jurisdiction humanities councils can create training programs under, that can create educational materials under. This will be material that can be used in the future to really think about how we educate ourselves and how we inform ourselves about artificial intelligence and our use of artificial intelligence.
Well, you might have to come help Congress understand how to use artificial intelligence in it, because we're because we're really kind of grappling with it, and people like to put it in a can and put a lid on it and kind of ignore what's going on, or just pull one thing out and just focus on that. So be interesting to do the follow-up on your work.
We would be delighted to come and give you a follow-up.
All right. So to my friend down at the other end of the table, it's 58 degrees in Minnesota. Are you missing it? I thought what was interesting when you were talking about, and I had similar experiences when my father was stationed with air bases, and spent a lot of time in Dallas-Fort Worth. I can even sing the right words to the right Texas state song. Is where you are at one moment in time can transport you past, present, and into the future. But COVID really kind of kept us from doing a lot of those things. So I was interested to see how your attendance has sprung up from COVID. And the fact that, as you pointed out, we have a lot of people coming through the mall. A lot of people confuse where the Smithsonian ends and starts with you, the Library of Congress, all kind of jumbled in together. But have you noticed anything different now as people are coming into the art gallery and viewing things, questions? I mean, still the same first-time people coming through, tourists coming through, and I'm glad the attendance is back. But has there been a change since COVID? Because we've noticed in the Twin Cities with arts, humanities, theater, and that, people are just like soaking it in, glad that they have it, but it's still part of a healing process. Can you maybe speak to that for a little bit?
Absolutely. I thank you, Ms. McCollum. I do agree with you that the arts have been a critical part of the recovery of the United States globally, but also the United States after COVID. I also think that in our sort of fraught world today, the arts provide a real moment of centering for people. And I started my comments with President Roosevelt's note that the importance of the National Gallery was that works of art are the symbols of the human spirit, he also spoke about shared humanity, and shared humanity is a part of our mission statement at the National Gallery. And it's proven that people come to museums in part because it's a social event. They usually come with somebody else, and they're there because they like being around with other people and then experiencing the spectrum from, our earliest painting is from the 13th century up to some things just created this year. And that you can see that spectrum chronologically and globally, I think helps to center people. And I firmly believe that in the years ahead, the arts and humanities are only going to become more important to us as a society for our democracy, and we're really proud at the National Gallery to be a part of that.
I want to dive back into what Mr. Elsey was talking about. Your work within the DoD with the arts and humanities. When we were at the height of injuries from the Iraq and Afghanistan war, the National Endowments for the Arts stood up, and they stood up in a big way to heal our soldiers. And I'm on both committees, the Defense Committee of that, and the endowment was selfishly giving their precious dollars to the Department of Defense. So now we have a program within the Department of Defense to do that. But are there more opportunities to expand? We had on other opportunities and collaborations where we were talking about mental health and drug and substance abuse and that. With all the challenges in society right now and the isolation that sometimes people are feeling, the reach out that you did for veterans and for members currently serving was significant, and for their families as well. Have you been approached about other ideas? Do you have other ideas we should think about? And we need to be careful with your dollars, so I'm always looking for other opportunities to have people come to you for ideas and then pay for them themselves.
Thank you for the question and for the acknowledgement. And I should say we continue to be really proud to continue standing up with DoD and making sure that program is strong and continues to evolve and grow. One of the expansions, as I mentioned earlier, has to do with being able to offer the services that our military personnel and has come to rely on within community settings. And I think that there's a lot to learn from how that rolls out and what implications there could be for other populations that are suffering from trauma of different sorts. The intersection between the arts, whether it is active engagement in actually making art, which is what happens with the...
They were making the
Yes,
masks.
yes. Yeah. And that's evolved to other kinds of engagements with other art forms as well. So whether it's active engagement or engagement in, participating to experience a concert or to go to a play or what have you, all of that speaks to healing processes, whether it's a healing process for a society and a community to come together again, or whether it is for individual health and individual wellness. And the more we learn about how that works and how the programs that we support might intersect with that intention, I think the better off we'll be as a country. Certainly in travel that we've done over the last couple of years, as we've talked with people about why the arts matter in their communities, coming out of the pandemic, there is a hunger to be together again. There's a hunger to satisfy that human need for connection. There's, in many communities, interest in understanding what the arts have to do with mental health and substance abuse. And there is, I think, appetite and will to look to other ways, other modalities of addressing these issues. And the arts come up over and over again as assets from which to build in those cases. So I'm excited about that, and it's part of why we're being intentional about looking at the intersection of arts and healing and wellness. Because I think that is, if we're going to understand the power of the arts in their fullness, that's a very important area to focus on and be able to to grow, really.
Well, as a social studies teacher, I could go back to the humanities, but I'm not going to. But Mr. Chair, before I yield, this weekend, there's another military family program that connects this committee to the DOD, and that's the Blue Star families.
Yes.
And I was down in Old Town Alexandria watching kids set a hook on a line to go out, maybe catch something, maybe some weeds, I'm not sure, but it was just wonderful to see the joy in their faces. And alongside of that, they had art exhibits,
Yes.
Creativity places for the kids
It's
to go.
a really wonderful
I just
program.
want to thank all three of you for what you do to heal our nation, because right now we need some healing.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and I echo all my colleagues' comments. We're so excited to see you here, and we're very supportive of the work that you do to tell the stories of our nation. I just got back from our congressional art competition last week, and it was so exciting to see artists from across my district and just to see how talented they were, and to see that the next generation of leadership ready to take the reins in the arts and the humanities was really thrilling. They seem to get better every year. I'm really encouraged to hear your comments about work to make sure that resources for humanities and the arts goes to rural and low-income districts. But frankly, I don't think we do a great job of that right now. And unfortunately, I think the trends nationally are going in the opposite direction, where it feels like a lot of the resources that exist are being centralized more and more in a handful of areas, a handful of institutions, and that arts and the humanities are increasingly becoming more accessible to the wealthiest and the most well-connected, and less accessible to folks in districts like mine. I think of the University of the Pacific, our one university that hasn't gotten an NEH grant for almost 10 years, whereas we have lots of resources going to great universities across the country. Obviously, that inequity exists in many areas, but if you tell me, for NSF or NIH funds that Harvard or MIT has a better biology lab, I think we can probably grant that they do great work. If you tell me that exists, and there's a monopoly for creativity or art, I'm not sure I quite see that, and yet I'm not sure I see that reflected in your budget. So, Ms. Lowe, you spent time at Harvard and Yale, which is great. Do you have a sense of the research budget for the NIH? How much goes to R1 research institutions versus R2, R3 institutions today?
Thank you for your question. And you mean NEH, right?
NEH,
and not
yes.
NIH, okay. I can get those numbers for you. I don't have those off the top of my head. What I can note is that we have made very specific strides to figure out how to reach our rural communities. We created a new Office of Data and Evaluation, and this office can give us information on exactly where our money is going, where we are funding, the districts we are funding, the types of institutions we are funding. But more importantly, I have asked for information on where we are not funding, because I have seen, I think that, I see very similar things that you do, that money has been going into very large institutions, and I want to see money going into small institutions. I want to see them applying and thinking about NEH as a resource for the work that they do. So our Office of Data and Evaluation has begun to start that work and to pull our data together so we can answer those kinds of questions. We then have just started our Office of Outreach, and this office will ensure that we have the information from our Office of Data and Evaluation to be able to do outreach into those communities, so we can tell them that NEH is a possibility for them, that we have grant lines that we have created that are specifically for rural communities and smaller organizations, that we can answer their questions, that we can connect them to staff within our office when they have a project that they are thinking about applying for. I agree with Chair Jackson that part of this work means being on the ground and listening and hearing what the needs are and having a better understanding directly from these communities, what has been their limitations, what have been the barriers to successful applications, and how we can think about the work that we do to make their process a little bit more easy, but also in a manner where they can be successful in their applications. And I'm really looking forward to continuing this work and moving that forward.
That's great. I know you all have a hard job where, if you give one grant to an organization somewhere that people can misconstrue or use for their own political means, you get roasted for it. But in my experience, smaller institutions like the ones in my districts that aren't as well resourced, they don't have an army of lobbyists, and it's really a struggle to put together a grant application. And I think that's why we haven't seen quite the resources from your agencies come to places in the country like mine. And what I'd really encourage you to think about is, simplifying and making that grant process much easier. I understand there's trade-offs there, but there's no degree of technical assistance that can really fix a complicated grant. And to think about where those cracks are. Just going through the list of looking at some of the NEH organizations that have been funded, it feels like the vast lion's share of those resources are going to the wealthiest institutions in America. And there's great folks that work there, but I think we'd love to work with you in democratizing that and understanding that a little bit better. Dr. Jackson, any thoughts on what we can do to support that effort and make sure that those resources go where they're going?
Sure. So at the NEA, certainly, I think is true with the NEH, there's a big commitment to reducing barriers and getting clear about what the barriers are from the people who face them is really important. So again, having that proximity to communities is something that I've certainly prioritized in travel and trying to understand how we have been showing up and how we need to show up going forward. I think in rural communities especially, it's important to not just think of the arts in a silo, and I think that's true everywhere, to not only think of the arts in a bubble, but there are so many examples of organizations that serve communities that are often isolated that are multifunctional. They are the youth development, they are senior centers, they are all of these things. And recognizing that that can be a very viable cultural center, and we need to take them seriously as potential applicants and partners. That's something that we're certainly committed to, is to recognizing what are the circumstances, what are the realities in communities, and how can we be responsive. And there's a commitment to continuing to do that. And happy to work with you on how to double down on that.
Yeah, we'd love to work with you. In my experience, world-class excellence for the humanities and for the arts aren't only found in the Ivy League, and in fact are often, found really in areas of the country like mine that are often ignored. And so it's been disappointing to see some of the grant applications that have been rejected or not accepted in previous years. And I think we're probably not the only district that sees that. Part of it is the limited resources and the tough decisions that you have to make. But would love to brainstorm what we can do to try to
Absolutely.
make sure that is a fair and equitable and democratic process to make sure that districts that maybe are not as don't have those institutions are still making sure that those are competitive. Thank you so much for the work you're doing, and Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Mr. Gilmore.
Thank you, Chairman. And before I kick off, I actually just want to acknowledge we've got a group of students from an Ivy League school. Sorry about that.
The worst.
From Princeton. They've been looking at how to reform Congress and make the institution function better. So we've got in the audience Kelsey, Lauren, Braden, Oscar, Avi, Cole, Don, and Emma. If they can all wave. Thanks. There you go. We're a tough crowd. So thank you for being here. I've got 3 questions and not a lot of time, so I'm gonna start, Dr. Jackson, with you. I represent 12 Native American tribes, and the NEA has been extraordinary, I think, in providing grants that have made a real difference in terms of celebrating their culture, sustaining their culture. We've seen grants to the Quileute tribe for the expansion of tribal culture and language programs, the Lower Elwha S'Klallam tribe for the creation of regalia and traditional ceremonial attire, the Port Gamble S'Klallam tribe for crafting supplies for youth to create regalia, Makah Days out for the Makah tribe. They actually do dance gear and do ceremonial dances with help from the NEA. NEA actually also named a National Heritage Fellow, Ed Eugene Carrier, from the Suquamish tribe, who learned basket weaving from his great grandmother, Julia Jacob, of the Suquamish tribe. So I hoped you might start by just sharing your long-term vision for expanding these opportunities for tribal communities and for Native artists.
Thank you. Thank you for the question, and thank you for the acknowledgement. We take our commitment to Native populations very seriously. As I said earlier, one of the things we're really proud of is that we're hiring for the first time a Director of Native Arts and Tribal Affairs. And the idea there is that we have a dedicated resource that is insightful and knowledgeable about how best to serve in Native populations, recognizing that there is complexity there. There's history and complexity. Yeah. And we want to be able to meet that need, and as well as not only meet needs, but fuel aspirations. And it is wonderful to see not only the reclamation of culture, but the advancement of living culture. Amen. And as I believe is true in every community, and to the previous point about, where does art and culture live? It lives in all communities. There's I think part of what the Arts Endowment's role is to help to bolster the cultural ecosystems that allow for all people to deliver their cultural gifts to the country. Yeah. And I think these are examples of places where intention and attention is necessary, and I'm happy that we're able to provide that.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Chair Lowe, I've got two questions for you if time permits. The first, we love Humanities Washington and the state of Washington. They do an extraordinary job, including on things like trying to address literacy rates. They have been leading the Primetime Family Reading Program, which helps families bond and develop a relationship with reading and books. We actually got a statement from the Pierce County Library System that said students in the Primetime Family Reading Program see themselves as readers and lovers of books. They're beginning to read more fluently and more often. What more could we ask for? And each session includes a complimentary meal and storytelling. And Humanities Washington has now expanded the program to include preschool age studies as well. To date, they've served over 10,000 individuals and nearly 3,500 families, and only made possible because of grants from the National Endowment for the Humanities. And very grateful for your partnership on that front. Just interested in hearing you share more about the NEH's vision for expanding programs that support literacy among young people.
Yes, thank you for that question, and thank you for acknowledging Humanities Washington. Our state and jurisdictional humanities councils in all 56 state and jurisdictions do amazing work on the ground with local communities addressing the needs that are very specific to their states and the populations of their states. That particular program is just one example of a literacy program that is being offered and run by one of the state and jurisdictional councils. We have a number of them, of the councils, that do these programs that are very specific to teaching literacy to young children, but also teaching literacy to the adults that are in their household who maybe are not fluent English speakers, so that they can have literacy within the home to support the youth who are going to school. The other avenues that we support literacy projects are through funding to libraries, both state libraries and local libraries, many of them that do their own literacy programs for various populations across their regions and across their communities. And we also do major funding. So we did a grant to the American Library Association for Great Stories Club, reading and discussions for at-risk youth in particular. And these are more national programs that really bring literacy projects and programs to individuals that might not get them otherwise. And we're very proud of this work and really interested in supporting this kind of work across the country.
Super. Chairman, do I have time for one more? Okay. I'm moving from reading to writing. Yeah. I appreciated that the NEH intends to carry out a program model on the original Federal Writers Project. which was outlined in the budget justification. The original Federal Writers Project produced books describing American life in 48 states, 40 cities, 18 regions and territories, provided the curation of invaluable oral histories, including an accounting of more than 2,300 first-person accounts from formerly enslaved people. It enabled great American authors to produce great and truly great American works. And we're approaching the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. We have this opportunity to show future Americans who we are now and what our values are now, how we live our lives now, what we hope for now, what unites us now. And to that end, I was hoping you would just share what the vision is by the NEH for the Federal Writers Project as we approach the 250th anniversary of our country.
Sure. Thank you so much for that question as well. I will have to say that NEH, one of the visions that we have and the mission that we have is in 250 years, when Americans have a question about who we were 250 years ago, the material to answer those questions will be available and they will have access to it. And that is exactly the type of projects that we fund. So we have already been doing some of this work through our Preservation and Access Division, supporting communities who are taking oral histories and written documents from individuals who are talking about their experiences over the pandemic and dealing with COVID-19. So we have a model for starting this program and for really thinking about how this work will move forward. We've also supported some of this work at our state and jurisdictional humanities councils, working very specifically in small communities, particularly those communities that unfortunately lost a number of their community members to COVID-19. So we are very interested in continuing this work. We are actively looking at what that project will look like as we go into celebrating the 250th, and we're delighted to be able to support it.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. Is this right? Oh, I thought I was looking for a green light. All right. Well, thanks all of you for being here with us this afternoon. Dr. Rosario, in going through your testimony and the President's budget request for fiscal year 2025, I appreciate that the requests for funding increases are relatively minor. As we all know, like many American families, we're all having to do more with less in the most recent years. During the fiscal year 2024 appropriations cycle, I voted on an amendment that would have cut all the funding for both the National Endowments for the Arts and Humanities, the NEA and NEH. I voted against the amendment that would have cut all of that. I voted no. And I'm confident that there are a lot of folks back in my constituency that disagreed with that vote. My request to you, or question to you now is simple, and I open it up to anyone that would like to take a shot at answering it. Can you explain why the NEA and NEH are deserving of hundreds of millions of dollars of hard-earned taxpayers' money each year, and why my colleagues and I should oppose efforts to strip such funding, as I'm sure that we'll most likely have to take that vote again this year.
Thank you. Thank you for your support, and thank you for the question. I think that the most comprehensive answer is that the arts are foundational to all that we want to achieve as a nation of opportunity and justice. The arts allow us to be fully human, to express our humanity, to see the humanity of others. And I think that in and of itself is a precondition for all of the other things that we say we want to accomplish. We can get more specific and talk about the impacts of the arts on the economy and recognize that it is an important economic driver. Increasingly, research tells us that it has a lot to do with our well-being and our health. It's part of what makes for a viable democracy. It's essential to our social fabric and to reknitting that social fabric. So I think that more robust understanding of the arts and humanities is the kind of understanding that's necessary for us to recognize that this is one of our wisest investments in our country.
I appreciate that response. There are a lot of folks back at home that would not agree with that, since we have so many other priorities in America right now. So I'm sure this committee is going to be faced with another such vote. My next question is for you, Ms. Lowe, and again, I appreciate you being with us today. I know that colleges and universities benefit every year from NEH grants to support humanities education, including those in my own district. And we know that in recent days, we've seen some institutions like Columbia in New York City and George Washington University just up the road become horrific epicenters of anti-Semitism in the guise of protest against the war between Israel and Hamas terrorists. Do you believe, and if so, why, that institutions that fail to make Jewish students or any culture or race feel safe to go to school and rally against different types of racism should be eligible for NEH grant funding?
Thank you so much, Committee Member Edwards, for that question. And I am like most Americans. I'm very aware of what has been occurring on college campuses. And I think there are a number of important American values that are at stake in what has been happening. One, the right to attend a college or university free from unlawful discrimination, the right to free speech, and the right to assemble and protest peacefully. But with that being said, I am not in a position to be able to comment on the events or incidents, as they are sensitive and fact-specific matters that are addressed best by college and university leaders where they are taking place on their campuses. But what I can assure the committee members today is that in my role as chair of the National Endowment for the Humanities, I take very seriously the full enforcement of the vast body of Congress's anti-discrimination laws, and that includes Title VI, Title IX, and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1975. And if in the event that NEH may receive reports that a recipient of our funds has or is violating any of Congress's non-discrimination laws, we will act very quickly to investigate. And if we find that discrimination has occurred, we will terminate the funding to that recipient. And if appropriate, refer the matter to the Department of Justice for corrective litigation. And with that being said, our grant opportunities are open to institutions across the United States. They are reviewed under a very rigorous peer review process. They are awarded based on the strengths of their applications and what has been presented, but we take very seriously if the institutions are doing something that is a violation of the law.
Thank you. I appreciate your candid answers, and Mr. Chair, I yield.
Thank you. Let me ask a question that is kind of spurred by, I guess, Mr. Edwards' question. Years ago, when I first came here, there was a Congressman, Jim Leach, who's from Iowa. And I think it was President Bush during his first term appointed him chairman of the National Endowment for the Humanities. He started a program called Civility. Apparently it wasn't very successful, judging by the result. No. But he went around the country with panels and stuff, and they talked about civility and how do you create civility in this country. We were in dire need of that today. Do you still pursue that program that he established? Is that still part of your the NEH's mission and stuff?
One of the things that we are very focused on is civic education, particularly among young people. And this is part of the work that we are doing with National History Day and supporting that work across all 56 state and jurisdictions and bringing students into that work to help them really understand what it means to be a part of a democracy, a very strong democracy. Where did that democracy come from? What informs that democracy? How do they take that information, share it among their peers, and then share it on a national stage in a national competition? You know, we really think that creating civic engagement and civic education opportunities at a young age is really going to foster a better understanding of what it means to be civically engaged as you become an adult. So we do a lot of work that ensures that we can fund civics education, that we can have these opportunities for young people, but also to ensure that we can have dialogue programs, that our state and jurisdictional humanities councils can create those exact opportunities. And we have a number of them, if not all of them, who have dialogue conversations to bring their community members in together, particularly to talk about opposing views or things that are going on nationally that they feel are important to have conversations about. And this work includes bringing in speakers that have been vetted through a speakers bureau that communities can bring in and have present, and then open up questions for community members to have. So we're very, very interested in supporting that work and continuing that.
Okay, thank you. One of the things, and I said it for 25 years, I guess, that I've been 22 years that I've been on this committee. So one of the things about the humanities and the arts that is important to me is getting the humanities and the arts out to rural America. I'm not really worried about the art program in Washington, D.C., or New York City, or Los Angeles. They have the resources to be able to develop their own programs, and I don't think they're short of resources to do it. Jerome, Idaho, Salmon, Idaho, different story. And as you know, a lot of the money goes to, or some of the money that we appropriate goes to local humanities councils and art councils in the states, and then down to local art councils. I know that because my wife serves on the Idaho Falls Art Council, has for a number of years. And as I look at this budget, the request, Chairman Lowe, includes $60 million for state humanities councils. That's a reduction below 2024 levels. Why is that? And is it not important? I think we ought to be increasing the amount that goes to the state humanities council and the art councils, frankly, because they do great work out there in those states.
Yes, I agree. We love our state and jurisdictional humanities council. The decrease is based on the proportion of the decrease in the overall budget. So our state and jurisdictional humanities council receive a portion of our programmatic funds, and a decrease in the overall programmatic funds will decrease the state and jurisdictional humanities
Is that
council.
statutory?
It is based on a formula that has been created, so it's a formula that if we would have to change it in order to change that funding level.
Is it the same true with the arts? Is it based on statute?
What's required is a minimum amount to regrant. What has been for a number of years has been agency policy.
Okay. Chair Jackson, I'm always very supportive of our veterans and their honorable service, and I understand the Creative Forces program has had great success over the years. Can you please elaborate on how this program has grown and the impact that it has on veterans and their families?
Sure. The Creative Forces program, now in its 12th or 13th year, continues to expand in terms of how many military personnel it serves. The realms in which it is available is now expanded from just clinical settings and on military properties to communities, and we're very excited about that. I think that there is continued evolution and innovation in the modalities that are offered to personnel. And we're seeing also an adjacent growth in the research that helps us understand what's happening from a health perspective, from a medical perspective, what happens when military personnel or people are engaged in creative process, what that does in terms of making healing possible. So there's evolution on a number of different fronts. I think number of people served, as well as places where it's available, as well as evolution of the modality itself.
Thank you.
Yes.
And let me just say, before I move on, Chairman Lowe, that I agree fully with what Mr. Elsey was saying about preserving native languages. If we're going to preserve native heritage, it starts with preserving their languages. I've had the opportunity, as you know, to go to Fort Hall and go to one of the small schools where they were teaching young students how to speak Bannock and stuff, and it was fascinating to sit and watch this. But we need to do that across the country because we're going to lose these native languages if we don't preserve them. So I appreciate the work you're doing in that arena. Ms. Pingree.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, really. You have been answered a lot of great questions and appreciate your answers very much. And I would just say, let's see, I can't explain why the administration did it in their budget, $210 million for the endowment for the arts and $200 for the humanities. Yeah, and I think having they both do incredibly good work. So when you were reflecting the cut to the state agencies, and I agree the state agencies are a really important way that these are structured, it's because of this proportional cut, and I hope some point, I love seeing the 210 little bump up there from 207, although 207 is the area code for Maine, so I've been, comfortable with that number for a while.
208 is the area code for Idaho.
Oh, there you go.
We're actually a little higher than you.
Yeah, there you go. Wouldn't you know? But anyway, I was just wanted to reflect that as part of the reason for that cut in the. So I hope we can even all that out. Anyway, I've had a chance to ask you guys both questions, and I just want to go back to Director Feldman. Back to kind of museum culture or whatever, and you've done so many interesting things there. You're the first female director. I know you've really thought a lot about diversity and inclusion in your exhibit. I just want to hear a little bit from you about how your perspective now on what should be included in museums and galleries has influenced the gallery's practices and the collections, and how some of the things you've been thinking are to sort of better reflect what America has impacted the visitor experience. And I'll just editorialize a bit. Actually, when Chair Jackson came to Maine, we took her to a couple of different exhibits, and I thought it was interesting to see traditional museums, very small museums, but still saying, we're not going to just put the kind of old masters of our collection. How do we lead with things that are about Indigenous people and the multiplicity of cultures that live in our state, or even talking about some of the tougher issues that we need to address through art. So anyway, I'm interested not to lead you into a complicated issue, but just, your perspective is different. You're the first female director, and how have you been thinking about this and what goes into the collection?
Thank you, Ms. Pingree. I do think, actually, I often tell the story that when I was contemplating the opportunity at the National Gallery, I had breakfast with one of my mentors in Minneapolis, Richard Davis. And I told him that I had only ever worked for museums that were deeply embedded in a community and that were responsive to their community, and I didn't know how to approach a federal institution. And Richard leaned across and he said, yes, but the nation becomes your community. And what does that mean? And I immediately got excited about that and realized it was a new challenge for me. And after arriving at the gallery, we drafted a vision statement which says, of the nation and for all the people. And that really is what drives our work. We think constantly about the plurality that is America and how we're sure that we're an institution that enables people to find themselves broadly. So there isn't one answer to that. And we love our collections and our historic collections, and we're thinking about how we do represent the nation. And so, for example, when I arrived, the museum didn't have any major works by Native American artists, and we're the National Gallery of Art. So we have added the acquisition of works by Native American artists to the work that we're doing at the gallery, and just trying to be a place where all people can find themselves. And by diversifying the staff and our program, we've been able to do that, but not at the detriment of any one group. We really are here to serve all people, and trying to tell new stories with the collection. So, for example, we recently acquired a painting by an artist, Mattia Preti, who was an Italian artist from the late 17th century. And the painting shows, it's not a portrait, but it shows probably a real man who is sitting on the ground. It was painted when the artist was in Malta in the late 17th century. And the man is sitting on the ground and he's cutting tobacco. And most of our Italian pictures are of religious subjects. And this painting enables people to see somebody who was perhaps enslaved at the time because of where Malta was located, certainly a working class person, and he's cutting tobacco. So it also tells the story of tobacco coming into Europe in the 17th century. And it's a fantastic work of art that meets all of our requirements of being an important work. So we are trying to tell new stories so that we broaden exposure and the attraction to the public.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Elsey. Ms. McCollum.
We just went through a process, and Chairman Cole's not here, and I totally respect him a great deal, and the people that I'm sitting here with know I don't toss the word "my good friend" when I'm on the House floor. Tom Cole's a great friend, but he within the constrictions of getting us to be able to do continuing funding projects in our communities, we had to cut out nonprofits. You work a lot with nonprofits, or you're working with nonprofits to get school children in or reach rural communities and that. I just wanted to give an example of how the NEA and the NAH do nonprofit work, and I'm going on the other side of the river. I'm going to St. Paul. The Ordway is a nonprofit theater, and it engages in the Kennedy Center's partnerships in education. So the Ordway provides arts education to all students K-12, ensuring that there are affordable tickets available to local shows. Sometimes it's free. They also do things at children's hospitals. We have children's hospitals that draw children in from treatment from a 5-state area, so sometimes very rural areas, and that. But part of what ends up happening is, they take some of the funding from you and then they cobble something together from a nonprofit. We're not going to be able to do anything this year, and maybe we do need to look at the way nonprofits are funded and that into the future. And I've got a letter into Mr. Cole saying that, I'd love to talk to him about some of these things. I even landed up with a fire department that couldn't apply the way it should have been able to because of the way that they do a joint powers agreement. They qualified as a not-for-profit, right? So as your grants go out, could you maybe talk about how you're really there doing matching community dollars, and it's often the community raising the dollars themselves to get a magnifying effect of what you do, and that might even be true when you're lending some of your art out? Just take a second and help inform me so when I get an opportunity to talk to Mr. Cole, in the coming months about next year about this.
I thank you for that question, Ms. McCollum. We recently agreed to lend a work of art to a small regional museum, and the director, who I know quite well, sent me a letter and said that he found our requirements for transport and crating onerous. And in his letter, he said, we small institutions are not going to survive if you big ones don't help us out. And I was really struck by his comment, and as I said earlier, from my past experience, I know what that's like. And so so much of our work now at the National Gallery is thinking about how can we leverage our collection, our resources, support from our patrons so that we can help, because it's not just lending the works of art to these institutions. They need help with shipping and insurance and security officers, education programs, and so we're taking a really long look at that because I do feel that we have, as the National Gallery, the obligation and opportunity to serve regional institutions.
Thank you for the question. As I said earlier today, we're taking very seriously the charge of reducing barriers as much as we possibly can. And we know that there are many viable and stretched organizations that are important to communities around the country. And being able to, I think, do two things. work with them to remove some of the barriers, whether it's through webinars or technical assistance in terms of filling out grant requirements and similar. That's something that we're committed to, but also taking a look at what can we do differently that actually removes barriers to organizations that, frankly, we have to rely on. We need to understand their importance in helping us meet mission. So the notion of removing barriers, I think, isn't only about how can we help organizations meet the match, do the paperwork, et cetera, but can we also look internally to see if there are things that we can change? I know that the staff is really committed to being an ally in helping people apply. When we go around the country, one of the things that I'm very proud of is that people often say that when they engage with staff that they've had good experiences, and I hope to continue to promote that. But certainly the working with the small organizations and getting to a place where we can do that easily is something that we also, I think, need to work with state arts agencies and local arts agencies on. So that coordination at the different levels to relieve barriers is something that we're taking seriously.
Yes, at NEH, and thank you for pointing that out and kind of some of the challenges that we see in entities that are trying to apply to us. We fund nonprofits, and we have found that we have an Office of Challenge program that is specifically built to help leverage non-federal funding for projects. So we find that applicants who apply to NEH, who are successful, who get an award from NEH, will often say, you know, this allowed us to apply for grants from other organizations, private foundations and funders, because they see that an award from NEH is a seal of approval that we are doing great work because we have such a rigorous peer review process. And we, you know, fund on the strengths of the applications. They've been able then to say, we can take this funding from NEH and tell a private funder, we've got this money, and they say, okay, we're really interested in the work that you're doing. You know, is there something that we can do to help? So that is what our challenge program, Office of Challenge Programs, is set up to help organizations do. They are required to do fundraising, to do some cost sharing and cost matching for the amount that they are looking for. We've also had the opportunity in FY24 to fill our assistant chair for strategic partnerships and initiatives, which is a position that had been vacant for a number of years. With this individual in place, we have been able to really start working on developing conversations and partnerships with private funders to inform them about the work that our applicants are doing, the needs that are still in those areas and within those either regions, communities, or in those specific topical areas that private funding could then come in and help support. And they've been very interested in the work that we are doing, the topical areas that we are supporting, and are very interested in having conversations and understanding what is the best way that they can also support the work that these communities are doing. This also goes to our state and jurisdictional humanities councils, who serve oftentimes as kind of a capacity building entity for these organizations, particularly small ones, to connect them to other funding opportunities, to fund them themselves and sometimes with smaller amounts, but to make those connections to ensure that we have the opportunity to bring more funding into these organizations.
Well, thank you, because I bring it up. The Playwright Center was one of my community-funded projects, and it's a National Playwright Center. And in that Playwright Center, there was funding that came through the federal government, our tax dollars. Minnesota's a donor state. The state did a match. You know, there were other nonprofits who were all involved in coming together as a community to do that. And this is going to be a facility where you're going to have some of folks that you have given grants to performing in and doing pieces in. And so I totally respect the chair's decision, the full chair of the Appropriations Committee. I'm glad we were able to keep our community projects, but we need to figure out a way that we can kind of knit things together, I think, in a better fashion. And I look forward to doing that in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Chairman. I'm going to keep it brief, but I actually really appreciate you asking about civility. I think it's one of the things we've just got to get better at. The capacity to disagree with each other without having it be a mess in our communities has become challenging. I went to a YMCA in my district thinking they were going to talk to me about gymnasiums losing money during the pandemic. What they wanted to talk to me about was fights breaking out at the Y over politics. And it's been so rough. They actually hired a consultant to train their staff and train their board in conflict resolution. They're hosting bridging events to try to get people to talk about their differences rather than, having to worry about getting on the elliptical and getting punched in the face. And I know actually a lot of the work that you all do is sort of in that arena, right? When we talk about the Federal Writers Project, that is about, sort of the best of us. What are our values? How are we sort of collectively Americans? Humanities Washington, actually, I participated in. They have a speakers bureau, and they did an event focused on political polarization, and they had Amanda Ripley, who was just crackerjack, and Eric Liu, and I thought it was just excellent. It was really well done, and I think an important dialogue that we should do more of. So I guess that's just encouragement. I will mention Andy Barr and I have a bill called the Building Civic Bridges Act to try to sort of support some of these hyper-local efforts to get folks talking to each other and building some of those divides, and to support colleges and universities that are doing research in this space. I think the NEA also, I know in your budget justification it mentioned funding to combat hate-motivated violence and to promote civic engagement and to promote media literacy. I actually think that's super important because the media often sort of amplifies the tensions and the conflict rather than helping us work through that. So I don't. Mostly, I just want to affirm the importance of what the chairman raised. But if you have anything further you want to share with members of the committee about the work you're doing, I think members of Congress, listen, we're a diverse 435 member organization, and some people are conflict entrepreneurs who profit off of the conflict, and some people I think are genuinely worried about it and actually want to see the institution function better, and would love to hear how we can be partners with you in that endeavor.
I would just thank you for again, that affirmation. I think that the arts need to be understood as a base from which that kind of civility might be possible. When someone experiences, whether it's a play or an exhibition, or there is a collective effort to make something together, the dynamics change, and what we see as barriers may disappear or become something else. And it's through those experiences, I often say, that engage us head, heart, and hand, intellectually, emotionally, and physically, that we're available for breakthroughs and opens up our prisms in ways that allow us to see things differently, in ways that allow us to be curious and lead with a question, and be open to hearing and learning from different points of view. And I think that that's one of the great benefits of arts participation, is that it becomes a pathway for that.
Thank you for that.
I would add that, you mentioned the state and jurisdictional humanities councils who do dialogue programs, who also train facilitators to help do these dialogue programs because they need facilitators in these instances. But our state and jurisdictional humanities councils also often serve as centers for the book in each state. And so you mentioned, literacy. Part of talking about civility and talking about the ability to speak with other individuals is reading books that are picked by the states, and they'll do a book for adults, they'll do a nonfiction, they'll do a book for young readers. They will pass these books out, they will make them available to communities, they will bring in authors, they will have discussion series, and a lot of them will do book festivals where parents come with their children, hundreds of people come to see the books, to get copies of the books, just like we do here at the National Book Festival. But then to also have these really in-depth conversation with authors who come from across the country, to have these conversations, to talk about the resources that they provide through their books. And these individuals, families can walk away with that and can walk away with some ideas on how to think about what they've read, how to think about the discussions that they've had. And we've seen just great success with book festivals across the country.
Great, thank you.
And I'll just throw in that I think that your question is really another way of asking Mr. Edwards' question, which was why the arts matter. And I go back to saying that it's about bringing people together. It's about feeling that you're part of something bigger than yourself. It's been proven by social scientists that when people gather together and feel some kind of awe in the presence of a work of art, or a performance, that they become less narcissistic. They stop checking their phone and worrying about other things. They become more generous, more conscious that they're part of something bigger than themselves. And what happens so often with the work that all three of us do is that you're bringing together people who may not normally be together, and that is the best way to break down barriers, is when you can see another human being as a human being with shared thoughts and ideas and create empathy for one another.
Yeah.
And I think that's why this work matters and why we need to make sure that it is a backbone of what we do in the United States.
Thank you. Maybe you'll work with us to organize a field trip of members of Congress to come do that.
I'd love to.
Great. Thank you, Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here. Thanks for bringing the toys. It always, we watch this and then we don't care what you say because we're all concentrating on, no, I know what you're doing.
I'm not going to tell our curator. You Leonardo a toy, though.
I've got one final question, if you could just answer it, Director Feldman. The FY25 request includes $7.7 million and 91 FTEs for guard contract security, which is an increase of 21 FTEs over last year. I also understand that all your staff vacancies, contract security guards are the highest percentage of vacancies across all job functions. With the rise in incidents of protesters defacing and ruining precious works of art around the world, has the gallery changed its security posture and protocols to better protect the collection? And have you seen an uptick in security incidents that and did that prompt the increase in the budget request for security guards?
Thank you very much, Chair Simpson. Yes, one of the reasons we are requesting more guards is because we have been, thanks to your support, fixing the roof in several quadrants of the West Building, which means galleries have been closed, and we haven't needed as many officers because of those closed galleries. And we will be finishing that work, and we want to open up all of our galleries for our visitors. So it's partly that, but yes, it's also the fact that we used to focus more on the magnetometers at the front door looking for guns and knives and metal, and we continue to do that. And you'd be surprised how many guns and knives we pull off people every year. But what's changed now are the activists who are coming with paint and food and substances to throw at works of art, and those you can't, or they're hard to find, which means more bag searches and longer lines. As all of you know, the security environment just keeps changing for us. And we are determined to protect the people who come to the museum, the people who work at the museum and volunteer, and also these incredible works of art that we hold and trust.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And again, thank you all for being here. I love the NEH, and I love the NEA and the work that you guys do, and I will make sure that we contact you so that we can set up a thing for the members and staff to come over and visit, because I really don't want to defund you. So. So I appreciate your willingness to do that. Thank you all for being here today. And with that, this committee stands adjourned.